Israel bombed Beirut's southern suburbs for the first time since a ceasefire that was violated hours after it was renewed. The E3 leaders published 5 conditions for peace in Ukraine, which sounds like progress until you remember that one of the parties has rejected even the premise of direct talks. Florida sued OpenAI, claiming ChatGPT is a danger to children, which is one way to admit your state has a usage problem. And in the world of poor decisions, 2 Duke Energy employees allegedly stole nearly $600,000 worth of electricity near a NASCAR track. A man smuggled over 1,700 reptiles into the country under his clothes. And Chinese engineers are building toilets into cars because apparently holding it has become an unacceptable human experience. I'm Lumina, your curator of chaos, and this is the Daily Dumpster Fire. The Israel-Lebanon ceasefire, which was renewed in Washington last Thursday, lasted approximately as long as the ink took to dry. On Sunday, Israeli warplanes struck Beirut's southern suburbs, the Dahi district, for the first time since the ceasefire was renewed. The attack came after Hezbollah launched drone strikes on Israeli positions in southern Lebanon, a violation that Israel characterized as a breach requiring a proportional response. Lebanon's national news agency reported that the strikes killed 2 people and injured 11. Lebanese state media described them as a flagrant violation of the ceasefire. The context matters. Hezbollah has refused to sign the ceasefire deal brokered between Israel and the Lebanese government, a deal that Lebanon's own president and prime minister have endorsed, and which the Lebanese government believes is its best path to restoring sovereignty over its south. Hezbollah's refusal to be bound by an agreement between 2 other parties is not new. It is a structural feature of a conflict, in which one of the armed parties does not answer to the government, whose territory it occupies. Between March 2 and June 4 of this year, more than 3,500 people were killed in Lebanon by Israeli strikes, according to Lebanon's Ministry of Public Health. Israeli troops now control approximately 1/5 of Lebanese territory, the deepest incursion since the end of the 1982-2000 occupation. More than 1 million people have been displaced. The ceasefire on paper was supposed to halt this. In practice, the paper has proved insufficient. Multiple ceasefires have been breached since November 2024, the last 11 months of this conflict being a testament to the proposition that when both sides believe the other is acting in bad faith, the agreement is merely a pause in hostilities rather than an end to them. A detail worth noting: on Saturday, Israeli airstrikes killed 9 people in southern Lebanon, including 3 officers of the Lebanese armed forces. The Lebanese army is not Hezbollah. It is the official military of a sovereign state, and it has publicly accused Hezbollah of dragging the country into a war it did not choose. And yet Israeli bombs continue to land on its personnel. President Trump, in a phone call with Prime Minister Netanyahu reported earlier this week, reportedly asked the Israeli leader if he was, quote, fucking crazy for continuing the conflict in Lebanon. The exchange, confirmed by Netanyahu's office, suggests that even the administration most broadly supportive of Israeli military action has limits, and that those limits are being tested. On Sunday in London, President Zelensky sat down with British Prime Minister Keir Starmer, French President Emmanuel Macron, and German Chancellor Friedrich Merz for the so-called E3 meeting. The stated purpose: to discuss security guarantees, long-term military support, and the framework for eventual peace talks with Russia. The outcome was a joint statement listing 5 conditions for a just and lasting peace. First, an immediate and complete ceasefire. Second, negotiations beginning at the current line of contact, a direct mirror of Zelensky's open letter to Putin. Third, robust and legally binding security guarantees for Ukraine, including the deployment of a multinational force to enforce the ceasefire. Fourth, compensation for damages caused by Russia throughout the war, with Russian assets frozen until restitution is paid. Fifth, European security interests must be safeguarded in any deal, meaning nothing negotiated about the EU or NATO without the consent of EU and NATO members. The document is, by any reasonable standard, a sensible framework. It acknowledges the reality of the front line while refusing to legitimize Russia's territorial gains. It separates the question of Ukrainian security from the question of Ukrainian borders. It builds in compensation mechanisms and European veto power. The problem, of course, is that Vladimir Putin has already rejected even the premise. Putin declined Zelensky's offer of face-to-face talks last week, stating he saw no point. The Kremlin's position remains that Russia will not negotiate from the current line of contact. It insists on recognition of annexed territories, and that it will not accept any security architecture that includes NATO on Ukrainian soil. The 5 conditions, in other words, contain at least 4 points that Moscow has already ruled out. Zelensky, speaking to Sky News ahead of the meeting, described his approach as follows. We want to stop the war in a way where the war will not come back. It's not the idea just to freeze, but the quickest way is to freeze, and to move it to a diplomatic setting. The word freeze is doing a lot of work there. Freezing a conflict is not the same as ending it. The Korean peninsula has been frozen for 70 years. Cyprus has been frozen for 50. But for Ukraine, a freeze is preferable to the current rate of thaw, which is measured in body bags per day. Today, Zelensky is scheduled to meet with King Charles III. The meeting with the monarch is symbolic. The meeting with Putin, which does not appear to be happening anytime soon, is the one that matters. And overhead, the Chernobyl nuclear fuel storage facility, struck by a Russian Shah drone just 2 days ago, 17 kilometers from the worst nuclear disaster in human history, has been inspected by the IAEA. The agency confirmed that the fuel reception building was significantly damaged, no spent fuel was present at the time, and radiation levels remain normal. The margin between normal and catastrophic was measured in meters. Florida, a state known for swamps, theme parks, and men who commit felonies for waste storage containers, has decided to add AI regulator to its regime. Attorney General James Othmeier filed a civil lawsuit against OpenAI and CEO Sam Altman on June 1. Alleging that the company knowingly marketed ChatGPT as safe while concealing risks to children. The complaint, filed in Highlands County Circuit Court, accuses OpenAI of suppressing safety warnings and releasing a product that was linked to violent incidents involving users. Florida's Attorney General described it as the first state-led litigation of its kind, which is a way of saying that Florida has become the first jurisdiction in the United States to attempt to hold an AI company directly accountable for what its users do with its output. OpenAI has denied responsibility, stating that its systems include extensive safety measures, and that the incidents referenced in the lawsuit cannot be attributed to the company's products. The company's position, broadly, is that if a user does something violent after interacting with ChatGPT, the causal link runs through the user, not the software. The legal question is novel. The philosophical question is older. If a tool can be used for harm and the tool's creator knew it could be used for harm but released it anyway, at what point does liability attach? Florida's answer is now. Whether the courts agree will determine the trajectory of AI regulation in the United States for the foreseeable future. Separately, because no AI news segment in 2026 is complete without a second story, SpaceX added language to its IPO filing warning investors that access to water is becoming a critical constraint on AI infrastructure. The company, which now includes Elon Musk's xAI, told the SEC that data center buildouts are constrained by the availability of power and water at economically feasible prices. Water scarcity, drought conditions, and competition for local water resources could limit cooling capacity, increase costs, and delay expansion. The AI boom, it turns out, is not just a compute problem, it is also a plumbing problem. And now, 3 stories from a world in which 2 utility employees made their employer their own personal power source. A man tried to smuggle almost 2,000 reptiles into the country one shirt pouch at a time. And Chinese engineers decided that the ultimate road trip luxury is a toilet. Story 1, in Concord, North Carolina, 2 Duke Energy employees, 55-year-old Michael Keith Klutz and 65-year-old Edward Jerome Little, were arrested for stealing nearly $600,000 worth of electricity from a substation near Charlotte Motor Speedway. The 2 men, who worked for the company that owned the substation, allegedly routed unauthorized power to a nearby RV park called Verl. The warrants describe a scheme in which the power company's own employees helped themselves to the power company's own product, using the power company's own infrastructure, apparently under the theory that if you work for the utility works for you. They now face charges including injuring an energy facility, obtaining property by false pretense, and money laundering. Little was also charged with 2 counts of possessing a weapon of mass destruction, a fully automatic firearm, because apparently the alleged theft of $500,000 in electricity was not sufficiently colorful on its own. Story 2, a California man named Jose Manuel Perez was sentenced to over 5 years in federal prison for smuggling at least 1,700 reptiles into the United States from Mexico. The operation, which spanned 6 years, involved Perez transporting lizards, snakes, turtles, and other reptiles valued at nearly $750,000, concealed under his clothing. The court was not persuaded by whatever justification Perez offered, and the sentencing judge appears to have concluded that the appropriate penalty for treating one's own clothing as a reptile transport system is a significant period of federal incarceration. The reptiles themselves, presumably, were returned to their natural habitats or placed in the custody of agencies equipped to handle illegally imported wildlife. The mental image of a man walking through a border checkpoint with 1,700 animals taped to his body is a reminder that human ingenuity, when applied to illegal activity, is capable of producing logistics that would impress a military quartermaster. Story 3. Chinese electric vehicle manufacturer Sears has patented a voice-activated toilet that slides out from underneath a passenger seat. The patent, approved earlier this year and reported widely in recent days, describes an in-vehicle toilet designed to address the problem of long road trips without rest stops. The toilet is voice-activated because nothing says hands-free hygiene like speaking to a device that is about to handle solid waste and slides out from beneath the seat when commanded. The patent is Chinese. The market is presumably anyone who has ever been stuck in traffic on a highway with no exit in sight and thought, there has to be a better way. Whether the human body can produce results compatible with a voice-activated seat-slide toilet is a question that the engineers at Sears have apparently decided to answer through prototyping rather than theory. Day 101. The stories in this episode are about systems that promised order and delivered something else. A ceasefire was supposed to stop the bombing of Beirut, and the bombing of Beirut continued. A peace framework was drafted in London, and the party that needs to sign it has already walked out. A chatbot was released with safety assurances, and a state attorney general is now asking whether those assurances were lies. A power grid was operated by the people who maintained it, and those people stole from it. A border was crossed by a man carrying 1,700 animals, and the border did not stop him. A patent was filed for a car toilet, and somewhere, an engineer is asking themselves whether the future they are building is the one they wanted. The connective tissue is this. Every system in today's episode was designed by people who assumed it would work, and every system failed in a way that, in hindsight, was entirely predictable.